Writing is a process, but it is recursive. This means that it's circular. Each part is essential, but some repeat. The steps include pre-writing, what you do before you start writing, drafting, that's the actual writing, revising, and this is the key to successful writing. Revising is actually the heart of writing. It's going back and changing different parts, usually for content. Editing involves making selections that are more accurate. Usually editing is the process of changing words and sentences, not entire content pieces. Proofreading, that's getting down to the nitty-gritty, where you start looking at grammar mistakes, and did you put the period in the right place, and did you use first person or not? And finally, peer review. Peer review is a process by which you look at somebody else's paper and provide substantive review so that they get the best possible grade. And other students do the same for you. It's similar to writers' workshops for writers. What they do is gather together and discuss their writing in order to make it better. Pre-writing. The first steps. You begin by choosing a topic, and then you narrow it down. This means making it more specific. To do so, you have to consider who your target audience is, the people that you'll be writing for, the purpose, the tone that you plan to use, and if you're going to use humor, you want to use humor throughout. If you're going to be sarcastic throughout. That probably won't happen in most college papers. You'll end up writing in a fairly serious tone. The point of view you're going to take, this is typically your opinion on the subject, what you think, and then the tense that you're going to write in. Tense means past tense, present tense, future tense. It's almost always easier to write in past tense, but sometimes you can't. When you're writing first person narrative and it's supposed to be in the moment, that would be present tense. So you have to decide what tense is going to work for the paper that you're writing. Explore your topic. That means you should read examples, models, other papers, discuss the topic with others, ask questions. And you can ask the who, what, when, where, why. I mean, they're the pretty easy questions, but there's other questions that you can ask. You can research. You can look up information about your topic. You can brainstorm. Can cluster, and you can free write. We'll be talking about those in a few more slides, so I don't want to go into those in too much detail. And then make a plan. Review the instructions. This is one of the big problems I see with students, is that they forget to reread those instructions. They get carried away, write an entire paper, and then it's due, so they forget to go back and check the instructions. So please review the instructions on a regular basis as you're writing, because that affects your grade a great deal. Also review the rubric and estimate the time requirements. A good topic should be interesting. It should be interesting for you and for your readers. And in this class, your readers will be me, your instructor, and the other students in the English 111 classes. So most of you are in classes that combine more than one class. So it's not just the people who sit with you or who you connect with on the discussion forums necessarily. There may be other students who are in the class who are elsewhere. The topic will need to be addressed in some depth. So it can't be something that is, something that a younger person could write. This is a college level paper. So let's use pets as an example. I love my dog. I have a dog. I talk about her all the time in my face-to-face classes. And pets is a broad topic. I mean, it's a big topic. Even dogs is a big topic. And I'm going to need to narrow that down. So do I want to talk about my dog and how much I love her and what a fun dog she is? No, I don't, because that lacks the depth required of college thinking and writing. I could write about the psychological or other benefits of pet ownership and describe how a pet, for instance, helps people be healthy, because you have to walk your pet. If it's a dog, you don't have to walk a cat, of course, but there might be other benefits. If you're riding a horse is a big pet. There's plenty of health benefits to that. Psychological benefits. There are other benefits to owning a pet, and that's more college level thinking. Same thing with relationships. A lot of people tend to write these papers, descriptive narrative to begin with. That's our first paper in this class. And they tend to write about, the person they love, or one of their children, or, several of their children, or their pet. And they narrow it down to have such private resonance that nobody else can really get the full sense of it. And they use a lot of shortcuts. So shortcuts are things where you use codes. So, for instance, I love my dog. She's such a cute, energetic baby. That tells you nothing. I'd need to go into a whole lot of detail and describe her personality and give you a visual description as well. So that depth needs to be there, and it's really important in this class. It makes the difference between a D paper and, an A paper. So we're talking big difference. Make sure you read the examples. They'll help. As I mentioned in the previous slide, you need to determine your audience when you're writing. Everyone in this class and I am part of your audience. There might be others who would read your paper, and they would also be your audience. The main things to consider are the likely backgrounds and knowledge base of the people who will read your paper. In this class, you're going to have a wide variety of ages, and this is a transient area. We have a lot of Navy here, so you might have people from all over the United States and even possibly all over the world in our class. So don't assume they have the same knowledge base as you, and don't assume they understand things in the same way you do. That helps you decide how much information you need to put in about your topic. You need to ask yourself, what information will you need your readers to understand? And don't assume that they know everything you do. That's a problem I see in a lot of papers for students. They, it's more writer-centered, so they take shortcuts. For instance, if I say 9/11 was a bad day, that is, we all remember, or some of you are so young that you've seen now historical documents containing information about 9/11. For many people who are older, we can remember the terror of that day, but that's still a shortcut. Instead of saying 9/11 was a horrible day or a bad day, describe it in detail so that your readers can be in that moment too and really understand it. So you fill in that background information instead of assuming people will understand the issue the same way you do. Different people have different perspectives, and when you're writing, you want your readers to understand your perspective. Even if they end up disagreeing with you, they can say, oh, at least I know where they're coming from. I understand. I get it. They think differently than me. And that's okay. Voting is an area that causes many people to disagree. As a college student, I'm sure you're would want the government to fund more student tuition and fees, right? Yet, as a group, students do not vote. They don't vote in the same numbers as those people who are over 65. From a politician's perspective, who's he going to cater to, or she? Politicians are going to cater to the people who vote. And at age 65, few people are concerned about funding college. So this issue is not addressed. That's one reason why target audience matters. If you're writing a paper suggesting an increased funding for college classes, some of the readers might be more aligned with those who feel college is the financial responsibility of the individual. While you might not make them agree with you, giving your reader reasons in a clear, unbiased way is more likely to allow them to listen or read your points. You must also consider the background information the readers will need. Never assume that they know what you do or that they hold the same frame of reference. As the writer, it is your responsibility to fill in those details. What do readers expect of an academic paper? Well, first they expect standard academic English. So slang is not acceptable. Normally contractions are not used. There are many rules. Some of them are listed here. Correct grammar and spelling. Accurate information. So misinformation or incorrect information is not acceptable. Logical presentation of ideas. So you can't randomly toss in the ideas and add them like we do in conversations. Like we'll carry on a 15-minute conversation and then say, oh yeah, back at the beginning you said this, and we'll toss in an extra idea. That's not okay in academic writing, so you have to present them in a logical fashion, and your thesis should guide that. Third person point of view, that means you use he, she, it, they, them, etc. Those pronouns that are third person. So we do not use first person, I, me, my, us, we, our, and other words like that, unless the instructor says it's acceptable. In this class, the first paper, the narrative description, you may use first person. Thereafter, your goal is to use a third person. Do not use second person in any papers. That means using the word you, yours, yourself. Follow the directions. Meet the length requirements. This is a big, easy one for teachers to go in and do a word count, and we see, you have 100 words less than the required minimum. That's a deduction of points really fast for us. Meet the due date for drafts and for the final paper. For drafts, it's important because then you get feedback. A lot of times teachers can provide feedback if you get it there in draft form and do it early enough. Include research if it's required, and use MLA format in this class. Academic papers are different from a paper that you'd write for fun. So there's a level of credibility and depth that's required, that's not required in something that you're just going to write for fun. Always decide why you're writing a paper. There are three main purposes that you will see in all writing. The first is to inform, second is to persuade, and the third is to entertain. Oftentimes they overlap, but you'll usually see a primary purpose. The primary purpose for most writing in this class and in most college classes is to inform. So you're basically informing the instructor that you understand the assignment, that you understand what you've been taught, that you understand the material in the course. The final paper in this class is a persuasive essay, argument persuasive, and so you will be using inform and persuade in that final essay. Most college papers require a serious tone. Humor is not usually effective. The first paper we have, the narrative description, could be humorous, but most other papers require a fairly neutral, serious tone. Tense refers to past tense, present tense, or future tense. Most papers should start and finish in the same tense. The only time you should change tense is when it is necessary to do so. So if you're talking about studying for a test today, and then you go to sleep and you get up, you still stay in that same present tense. If you're talking about a test you took yesterday, in a paper you're writing right now, you use past tense. So there has to be a real reason for changing tense. Most papers are easier to write in past tense. That means usually the standard past tense is to add ed to a verb. When you are writing in first person, sometimes you start in what's called media res, that means in the moment, and you tend to write in the present tense. But then you start the same way as you talk and you shift to past tense. In writing, it's not acceptable to shift back and forth without a good reason. A good peer review can sometimes catch that, and it's one of the things that people should look for when they're doing their own reviews of their own papers. So once you're doing the revising and the editing phase, when you get to the editing phase, that's one of the things you should do is look at tense. There are many different pre-writing techniques. These are the most common that I see, and I recommend that you try a few of them throughout the semester. I'm not going to break them down because there's additional PowerPoints in future places that will show you what they all are. I'm sure many of you are familiar with brainstorming and listing, clustering and mapping, free writing. You can use the 5 W's, the questions. Those are the common ones. Add how to that, and that should help you. Another question that I think students should add more frequently is, so what? Ask yourself, what's the importance of this that you're adding in here, the significance? Discuss with another person, with classmates, with people in your family. Read a lot of models and samples, especially those provided by your instructor or designated in the textbook as the type that you're writing, and then outlining, which is a fairly common one. I've been teaching for over 20 years, and I can tell you to plan and explain the need to plan, but I find that a lot of students don't do it. Unfortunately, grades can reflect on that, right? So I recommend a plan. Check the due date and review the instructions are two of the most important parts of the plan, so that you can give yourself enough time, and make sure you check the rubric as well. If the rubric says you need 5 sources and your paper doesn't have 5 sources, you're going to end up with a lower grade. So you need to make sure you check those 2 items and make sure that your paper meets those requirements. In addition, right before you submit your paper, you should go back, give yourself time to go back and review them for the instructions in the rubric once again. So at the beginning and at the end, it's a really good idea to check those items. Figure out how long it's going to take you to earn the grade you need. If you're in one of the health science programs, especially in nursing, there are limited seats and you need an A. That's the bottom line. You need an A in your courses, especially in English, because it's double weighted. So you have a desire for an A. Your planning needs to allow you the time to earn that A. Review the ideas from your pre-writing and then create a strong thesis statement. Often your first one is a working thesis and you'll modify it as you go. Determine the organization by creating an outline or a map. Determine any types of support you need and plan a library visit for research if you need it. Writing is just that. That's during the writing stage. You're going to write drafts. You're going to do that recursive rewrite where you go back through and you change some parts around and then you have to rewrite again. Revise your draft several times throughout the writing process and create a title that is not the assignment name. So if you're writing the narrative description paper, you are not going to call it narrative description paper. You're going to come up with a creative name that matches the content of your paper. As I mentioned earlier, revising is the heart of writing. Revising deals with the content, so start with finding and correcting content problems. Focus on the ideas, and then focus on the organization. Do you have the ideas presented in the way that makes the most sense? These are the 2 areas that are covered when you revise. So you move content around, or you add content because you don't have enough detail, or you take away excessive detail. Those are the kinds of things you do in the content. Editing refers to word level changes in the paper and sentence structure level changes. So you'd consider your word choice. Are you using the exact right word? Do you have your verbs all matching up in past tense or present tense, whichever one you choose? The style also would guide your thinking. So if you're writing an academic paper, it's going to be more formal, so you wouldn't use slang or contractions. You would use words that have exact meaning. You try to use that anyway, but in academics there's a grade attached to it, so it's even more important to do so. Proofreading is final once over on a paper before you submit it. You're looking for typos and grammar errors. Microsoft Word does not find all errors. However, if you use the video I show you on how to modify Microsoft Word to do the proofreading, the more heavy proofreading, it'll catch a few more, but still it's going to be your responsibility to proofread. The EFE chart in Module 2 will also help you proofread your paper on a final basis. A visit to the Writing Center. TCC has 4 writing centers, and you can visit that one on either of the campuses. They can also help you proofread your paper. They're not going to look for every single mistake, though. They'll typically find 1 or 2 and mark them. When you visit the writing centers, you can only work on 1 or 2 areas of concern at a time. So proofreading, that really, your paper really needs to be pretty set to go into the writing center to deal with that. Why, oh why do teachers make students conduct peer reviews? Well, first, because other people, your audience, will pick up on writer-centered writing and help you include information and details that will help you make sure that your readers all understand, which is important, but also earn a better grade, which is personally important to you, I hope. Second reason is students in a class hear the same information and read the same instructions and might pick up on something that you missed. If you go to the tutor and you have written a paper that writes about your love life, in this class you can't write about your love life. That's a rule. No love life. You just can't. when you're writing, and in the class, your other students can pick up on that, but when you're writing a paper like that and you go to the tutoring center or you submit it to MindTap Tutor or one of the other tutor services, they don't know that rule because they don't sit in that class. And unless you remember to share it with them, they won't know. And your paper will earn a 0 because it's simply not following the directions, not meeting the requirements of the assignment. So it's really important to do peer reviews.